Estás viendo Canal América, televisión dominicana para el mundo.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your fears.
Welcome to a Time for Truth show. I'm your host, Dr. Bernard Fialkoff, and it's a pleasure to have you back with us again. Many of you have been asking how to get the previous shows. Very simple. Go on YouTube and subscribe at a Time for Truth show. And today, we're in for a treat, and we're going to deal with something that's very important, because in today's world, public speaking and having the confidence to address people, crowds, and not be reticent on voicing your opinion has become very important, because we're very turbulent times. And we're very lucky to have with us a very acclaimed, not only public speaker, but mentor. And so, Buddha, let's get right into it and put his pictures up on the screen and bid a warm welcome to our guest today, Mr. Joe Yazbeck. There you go, with his book. He's an acclaimed international master speaker and leadership coach for top industry executives and leaders. And he's the best-selling author of the book you just saw, No Fear Speaking. Those are the high-impact public speaking secrets to inspire and influence any audience, and published in 8 languages. Is founder and CEO of Prestige Leadership Advisors, whose mission is to create dynamic, powerful communicators that significantly influence world communities. Joe has worked with heads of states, leaders of major corporations, high-ranking military officers, political candidates, and best-selling authors. Mr. Yazbeck has delivered over 4,000 presentations worldwide over his 35 years of mentoring, resulting in tens of thousands of empowered and winning audiences. As part of his accomplishments, Joe created the Successful Leaders Taking Action Roundtables, hosting vital leadership discussions with numerous top industry professionals, and has personally coached top leaders and executives in the technology, governmental, financial, healthcare, law, and education industries. Prestige Leadership Advisors is headquartered in Largo, Florida. And it's our pleasure, Buddha, if you bring him up live on the screen, to welcome Mr. Joe Yazbeck to a Time for Truth show.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Ben. Quite an introduction. I'm happy to have this great conversation with you.
Well, you know, I'm very happy to have you, and I want to get right to it because you have so much to offer the audience. But first, I wanted to ask you, please tell a little bit of the viewers about your early years, your background, and, you know, before all this happened.
I'm still experiencing my early years, Ben. Well, there was a time where I had an opportunity to get up on a kitchen table at the age of 6. And I was wondering, as I looked up to my mother, I said, "Mom, why is everybody sad? Are the relatives dressed in black and looking so sad. And she didn't know how to tell me somebody died. But all I knew was, I said, I don't like seeing my family not happy. And she looks at me and she says, get up on that table, Joey, and do that song and dance you love. And it was a kind of a bebop, Elvis Presley knee jerk to the song of the Diamonds, Little Darlin'. And I'll never forget, a very young age, inspired by, as I was clicking to the beat of Little Darlin', everybody started clapping and smiling faces started growing. I thought, I love this. I want to do this. And so I decided to sing. I decided to entertain. And that was my early years. My father was a trumpet player, a piano man. His main job, of course, to keep the family alive was as a Teamster truck driver. But he was always involved in music, and it was very contagious. And so I started getting involved in theater, singing, and got my degree in theater, actually, from a very good college in northeastern Pennsylvania, King's College. And then I went to New York, decided to bypass New York and go right to LA and hit California, and got some work in theater and acting before I started my first real job of giving lectures on the subject of communication, which was really my first job after graduating from college back in 1974. So those were my early years. And I think if it wasn't for music and portraying Shakespeare and all the classics and doing musicals like West Side Story, where I played Tony, it was a very extroverting experience. And I think the arts are absolutely vital. The arts, the performing arts, the literary arts, and public speaking is a performance art. And so it does nothing but bring you out. It gives you more breath, more space, gives you more to be, more to do, more to have. The arts made me blossom. And so that was my early years of having a fundamental building block of communication in my life.
Wow.
Great question.
Well, beautiful answer, and it gives a lot of insight into you as a human being and why you do what you do. And you know, it's funny because my wife's name is Maria. And so I want to do something impromptu. If you can give me 15 seconds, I'm going to lead into it. And then I know you've got a great voice. You can go 15 seconds. Here we go. The most beautiful word I ever heard.
Maria, 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 Maria.
Wow. Thank you, Joe.
Oh, you're welcome.
So, you know, that's for my wife, who actually helps a lot with it.
You are a charmer, Dr. Ben. You are a charmer.
Well, you know what? Thank you. And I got to give her gratitude because she helps a lot with the shows, and my wife Maria, and so that's for you. And so I know what inspired you to go on, but I'm curious. So what made you make the transition from theater, from music, into what you decided to then do, which is to teach public speaking, mentoring, leadership? What happened, and what led you down that path?
You know, life has transitions, and you have to have the risk to take the chance to make a move. And I decided to train performing artists. I developed a beautiful toolkit of stage presence, confidence building, owning the stage, owning the audience, all of that for artists, for singers, for bands. I had a company called Heartbeat Productions. I loved it. I learned a lot. I cut my teeth on it, on coaching. And I decided, and I looked and I thought, oh my goodness, this is something that I think can help any industry. This is something that can help a lot of people become successful and improve their confidence in life. And I transitioned everything. I don't think I've ever stopped helping performing artists, but I decided I can help more people. I can help more people with more depth with communications to leaders and executives in companies. So I decided to start Prestige Leadership Advisors. And this was, maybe 14 years ago. And it became a passion, because business has always been a passion of mine anyway, because I think that business is really the cornerstone of our economy, much like the family is the cornerstone of our society. You see, and given the fact that when we have so many struggles going on in business with inflation, now we're embarking upon hyperinflation. We have so much struggle with hiring the right people, with leaders disconnecting from their teams and not knowing how to connect with them, because we live in an age of connection and communication now. I couldn't think of a better skill for them to have than communication skill. So when you look at the influence that public speaking has, particularly now in the age of social media, being on camera, podcast, streaming, all of it, virtual conferencing, particularly the last 2 years, since we're now post-pandemic, it's a must. You have to master public speaking in order to effectively lead. And one cannot be an effective leader without being a confident communicator. And that's when I started to write my book. And my book was released in 2014. So,
Well, it's so
tell you
so
the
true.
truth.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, please.
No, go ahead. You were going to say something. I cut you off. Go
Well,
ahead.
I realized after 30 some years
Uh-huh.
that I had something to write about. And I had a big disagreement with people just starting business, writing books just to get business. They had nothing in them. It was just to get a book written. So it would be like a PR, a calling card for their business. Until I found out, I have now my book now published in 8 languages. And the 8 languages are Spanish, Russian, German, Chinese, Hungarian, Czech, Slovak, and English. And every one of those speaking countries I visited. And it was a beautiful experience traveling the world numerous times, giving workshops. That's Bratislava, Slovakia, which I've been to 3 times. And it's very interesting. I never thought that having 8 languages of my book would help promulgate the amount of interest in communications, but it has. And so Hablar Sin Miedo was published in Mexico. And I think one of the photos that Buddha put up there was the Secretary of Public Education. Her name is Cynthia Benavides. And there I am with my arm around her with the Spanish-speaking book. And we had a wonderful conversation, Ben. You'd love this. This is right in your wheelhouse. We were talking about getting the book adapted for kids, for teenagers, for public education, and branding it freedom of expression. And put her into tears. Literally, she was in tears. What was supposed to be a 10-minute conversation ended up in an hour and a half. You might call it kind of a love fest, you know? And so that's in progress. And Slovakia right now is readapting my book for that country, and also Czech Republic. So I'm excited about it. That's what makes me passionate up every day.
Well, congratulations. Those are great accomplishments. And, you know, I want to ask you something, because we have people out there watching this show. What are common mistakes? What are the mistakes that happen in public speaking and in getting messages across?
I have a chapter in my book. It's chapter 8, and it's the 8 blunders to avoid in public speaking. So I can run these down to you, and I'll tell you, if not all of them, but I'll tell you, number 1, you have to know your audience. You have to know them, what interests them, their needs, their wants. What do they want to know? Really, it's like having a one-on-one and knowing who you're speaking to. So that's the first one. Really do a study on who your audience is. Number 2, you've got to have a purpose for your presentation. You have to ask yourself the question, why am I here? And to answer that question should answer this question. How am I helping? I'm enlightening, am I educating, am I empowering, am I inspiring? That would answer the question. And this third question needs to be answered, and very rarely, and this is the most violated, what's the next step I want my audience to take? What's the product of my presentation? What is the outcome I want? And that is manifested in the call to action. A call to action should always be present no matter what presentation. It could be a 30-second commercial. It could be a 5-hour webinar or training. The call to action is what is it you want your audience to do as a result. And this is where you inspire your audience to take a next step to commit to. The other factors that are really important in speaking is edit, edit, edit. Don't get into information overload. The least you have to say, the better. Get your point across in as little words as you possibly can. And then be well organized. Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. That's something over the years I've realized and I've corrected myself on. You're so right. You know, being verbose, talking too much.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let me ask you a question, because you seem like you have it really organized and you have a schematic. And so what technology is it that you're using to get all this organization? What is it that you do, or what are you basing it on?
Well, if you're talking about a standard operating procedure, which it is, public speaking and communications is a standard operating procedure. It's also an art. So I call it an artful science, because you need to have both the preparation, the organizational steps, the outline, the structure, and then also the ability to infect with emotion, positive emotion. And that's where communication comes in. And I think the most important is my earlier training, my continuous training in L. Ron Hubbard's technology of communication. You know, right out of college, I was teaching it. I learned it. I experienced it by being a student, and I started giving lectures on it. And I learned a lot because I had audiences to communicate to. And what was I registering them for? A communications course. Because every single one of those people that were in my lectures had communication problems, whether with family, whether with at work, trying to get a promotion, not raising their kids properly, relationship difficulties, financial, they're all communication related. I decided to learn what communication is. So the biggest staple, the keystone to my company, and the keystone, the most, I think, integrated core of my delivery is communication that I've learned from the works of L. Ron Hubbard. There's a fantastic amount of material on it. And one of the most important factors is this: you cannot really talk to a group. You can only talk to one person. It violates the communication formula. So having a group to speak with, many people get overwhelmed when they're trying to speak, or if they've got 100 people on a webinar. If you're speaking with one person, I don't care if you've got 1 million people in front of you, you're still talking to one person. Every single one of those thousands or millions of people are going to feel that you are speaking to them. Franklin Delano Roosevelt had his famous fireside chats during the World War II days, and people had their ears peeled to the radio. And the reason why he was such a hit, because he gave them encouragement in such a way that they all felt he was talking directly to them. He made it feel as though he was having a one-on-one conversation. And that's the secret to communications. I've had many executives and many owners of companies that have had huge amounts of terror. I mean, just scattered and dispersed. They knew they had to get up in front of their staff meetings or go into a boardroom or or they had to do a webinar themselves because they were the brand ambassador to their, and I had to train them on just being themselves. You don't want to speak like anybody else. You don't want to be anybody else. You need to be yourself talking to one person, relaxed, comfortable, and that is what will make you commanding right there.
It's so true, Joe. You know, there's an interesting story I could relate because there's a person that I know who was very shy and very quiet individual. And years went by, and it was interesting because he did what you talked about. He took this Hubbard training, and there was a wedding, and years later, and so he saw some people at the wedding, and he spoke at the wedding, and he had drastically changed. And one of the people that knew this guy came up to him and said to him, "My God, years ago, you would have never spoken that way." And, you know, this guy said to him, "Oh, well, thank you," you know, and didn't think anything of it. So I know what you're talking about because I've heard a lot about Hubbard technology and like, so I'm just curious because I've heard a lot about Hubbard and, you know, I've read some of it myself and studied it myself. What would you say his basic purpose was in his life?
To make people better. There's no complicated esoteric thing here. His intent was to improve people's lives, period. Everywhere, on every, and he jumped in and took responsibility for many different levels of improvement: literacy, drug rehabilitation, criminal reform, all of it. And even business. He wrote a 14-volume encyclopedia of management and administration, which I have built my company on. And I think it's the most important. When I have my library of his work in my offices, I say that's the most important employee I have right there. The most stable employee I have are those references. Is if I get into a jam, I go into any one of those volumes and find the answers, and it immediately pulls me out of it, or reminds me of what I'm supposed to be doing that was successful. So he's found answers, and he's quite an explorer. He's quite a scientist, and he has put everything he has in writing in many, many books about communication, about being confident, about learning how the world works. The way to happiness itself is a moral group. It's a precept, 21 precepts of moral character building, and I can't imagine not having that in the hands of our kids growing up, and their parents having discussions around each of those precepts. Things like set a good example, you know, or seek to live with the truth. You see, or be competent, and the three basic factors of what competency is. Beautiful stuff. You see, so it's always great to have principles like this, whether they're spiritual, whether they're management. I think management principles are in a way spiritual anyway. But to have those kinds of, really think about it. I mean, our leaders need to be consequential, Ben. If leaders are leading and they're making decisions without consequence, it's not ethical. They need to take a look at what is the ripple effect of a decision. Are they basing their decisions on opinion, or are they basing it on factual, truthful data that can be relied upon?
So true. You see in today's world that consequences and the end result of a program is not being looked at. So you go, well, I don't get it. You know, it's like if you came to me I'm a surgeon, I'm a dental implant surgeon. So it would be like saying, well, it doesn't matter what success rate I have with your dental implant, even if it fails, I'm going to say the same thing, which is ridiculous. So you're so correct in that. And, you know, we're nearing the end of the show, so I wanted to give you an opportunity. What concluding statement or remark would you like to leave our viewers with at the end of today's show, Joe?
I love simplicity. I'm going to give you a very, very simple thought.
Yes.
Show up. Show up. Appear. It's an age of appearance. Get visible. This is the best way to connect with people you're trying to attract, whether they're customers or otherwise. Clients, prospects, advocates, stakeholders, show up. Get on camera. Communicate. And you can't really connect if you don't communicate. And if you don't show up, your communication is non-existent. So I am a big advocate of visibility. I mean, it's not easy for some people to be looked at. But this is the key, because life will change for you the moment you move from introversion to extroversion. And even if you practice a very simple drill like this, take a walk. Go outside, take a walk. Don't think, look. Looking is very powerful. So when you show up on a microphone or a camera or a group meeting, look out, look at everything. Now you're appearing. Now you're observing instead of looking inwards. There's nothing really to gain from looking inwards. It's looking out. And that's what gives you space. When you have that much space, you've opened up your space. Guess what you've done? You now have included people in it. If you're in your head, you're not including people in it. So appear, open up your space. Even if you have to take a walk before you appear, take a walk to exercise your ability to look outward, and do it until you start feeling better, and it will change your life. Simple things like that.
Well, Mr. Joe Yazbeck, thank you for appearing on our show today. And, you know, with your powerful words, as simple as they may seem, you know, there's a saying that simplicity is very powerful. So thank you for being on the show, Joe.
Ben, let me say this. I want to tell you, you're an amazing, to me, you're heroic. What you and your lovely daughter has done in the world has been unbelievable. And I just give you the utmost accolades about what you've accomplished. Is not easy. It has taken a lot of courage. So I want to thank you for giving me the privilege of having a conversation with you, and for everything you've done. Thank you.
Well, you're quite welcome. For all of you watching, you know, I want to thank you, and Joe and I thank you for what you're going to do, for what we're doing, what we're all doing, because we're all working together as mankind, and we have to realize we're mankind. So from A Time for Truth show, I'm your host, Dr. Bernard Fialkoff, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of A Time for Truth. Good night.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that you're giving everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your feet